All right, we are moving into the next topic here, which is external identities. Now, this is an important topic here, and it's actually much more complicated. We're gonna just kind of touch on this right now. We're going to talk a lot more about this when we start talking about the collaboration side, like Teams, OneDrive, and SharePoint. So it'll come a lot more into play. But for now, I want to give you at least a preliminary overview of some of the things that we can do inside of here. So first and foremost, let's start jumping into well, again, what the heck are external identities? Well, external identities are third-party collaborators. I work with, again, I'm a business. I work with another business, but they are a completely separated, unique and separated entity than ours. Okay, they are completely different. So what happens there is that how do they have access to our resources? How can we talk to each other? Well, email, that's easy. But what if we want to start collaborating with each other? Well, what are some of the options that we have? Well, this is where external identities come into play, and Microsoft is actually making a huge push on these and the way these work out here. But first, let's look and see. So On-Prem Logic. So right now, a lot of times what end up happening is I'm working with another company. I'm mom and pop shoe shop, and I work with a shoelace manufacturer. Makes sense. They're two separate entities, two separate logical businesses, two owners, two things that are completely separate businesses, but they work together very frequently. So how do we work with we work with the resources inside of each other. Maybe we want to collaborate on, I don't know, new diagrams for shoes and shoelaces and all of that. Okay, that's fine. Well, generally speaking, the only way we can really do it now, as it stands, there are other ways, yes, but for the most part is you create a Active Directory account for that external party. So I will create an Active Directory account in Mom and Pop Shoe Shop for all of the shoelace employees, and then vice versa. I'll do the exact same thing. So these are two separate accounts here that I have to essentially keep track of. And it's kind of annoying, but I will have essentially two accounts in those instances, and I'll have to log into one or the other depending on the scenario. So that's generally the way that we work now when we're trying to collaborate in on-premise. But in the cloud, well, let's kind of start talking about, why do we necessarily care about in the cloud and what's different? Well, what we want to do is we want to have the easy collaboration between two distinct organizations. Now, it doesn't have to be organizations per se. That's where we get this B2B or B2C. So B2B is a business to business. Those are vendors, third-party vendors or partners, whatever they may be that you're working together on, and you two as organizations are close, but you're two separate organizations. B2C is a more complicated scenario here, but this is really we're getting to the point of business to consumer. So think of it from this perspective is that I'm a mom and pop shoe shop, but I am selling to the general public. So a consumer could be anybody. Well, what are we doing together? Maybe we're using Teams, SharePoint, or maybe a specific enterprise application we're working on and we're talking about. All of this is very relevant to the field. The B2B portion in business to business is a lot more relevant. B2C is a growing thing, and it is moving along. There's no doubt about it. But really, when it comes down to it, there's a lot of things that B2C comes into play, and you need true development resources to be able to essentially get a portal around it. But it could be done. So let me just preface with that. So inside of Azure Active Directory, how do we work? Remember, on-premise, we would have two separate Active Directory accounts, two separate usernames, two separate passwords. Well, we have simplified the account or the way that accounts work like that here as guest accounts inside of Azure Active Directory. Guest accounts are homed in another Microsoft account. Okay, so again, Mom and Pop Shoe Shop, both are in Office 365. But in Mom and Pop Shoe Shop and the shoelace employee, so I'm a shoelace employee coming into the Mom and Pop Shoe Shop, I will have a guest account over there, but it's my same username, same password, and I actually authenticate from my shoelace company. I authenticate from that. So it's the same username, the same password, but I'm coming over into the Mom and Pop Shoe Shop. Same concept applies vice versa when we go the different ways. Now, we have to go through this here, and we have to be able to secure this, of course. But when it comes down to it, the guests themselves and the guest experience, the invitation is actually quite easy. So we want to make sure that we secure this, that users are, we either have some sort of governance around it, whether it's locking it down to specific users can invite, or we can invite to specific domains only. We can get creative here, of course, too. But before we jump into that here, and that's going to be, again, really in the collaboration section there, where we start talking about Teams, OneDrive, and SharePoint. But for now, let's leave the topic as guest accounts. They're just going to be accounts that are homed in another Active Directory, Azure Active Directory, and they essentially authenticate through to your tenant. So it's very useful and it's helpful in this situation, and we'll start looking at some of the security features here in the next lab here. So why don't we jump right into that? That should be a relatively short one here as well.